We're taking a look here at the revised edition of the Tome of Adventure Design. This video is going to look briefly at the digital version of this. I just purchased it, and when I get the physical copy, I will be doing a video showing the physical copy and also showing it in comparison to the first edition of the book. I've done a discussion of the first edition of the book, and it can be seen in my video, Easy Ways to Be Your Own GM. And in fact, it formed the basis of that video and the basis in many ways of the direction that Geek Gamers took after I published that video, which became a very popular one. The reason that the Tome of Adventure Design became the basis of that is because of the breadth and depth of the material that it offers for the soloist, and we're going to get a brief look at that here. In short, this revised edition offers essentially the exact same content as the first edition of the book, with the exception of some word clouds that are populated on each page that we'll see as we go through it. There are design differences in the layout of the book, making this one much longer, and additionally a more detailed table of contents, as we're looking at here on the first page of the table of contents, showing a lot of the subheadings, making it easier to use. The first edition of the book was kind of crammed in terms of the design. I actually don't mind that design, but this one is definitely more spread out. And when I do my video looking at both editions side by side, when I get my physical copy of this book, I will show you some of the differences. But content-wise, essentially you are getting the exact same content with some minor changes. So if you have the first edition of the book, you should note that you're not going to be getting new details in terms of tables, at least as far as I can tell, and at least as far as I've read. But the table of contents here is definitely laid out differently and gives a sense of the depth that you have. And as we scroll through it, we can see it is pages and pages long. It is very, very extensive, and it covers everything from dungeons to wilderness to some types of adventure protocols and structures and descriptions of what you can do to form an adventure. And chapter 1 indeed starts with these principles and starting points here, and you can see that there are discussions of how you put locations in, how you put missions in, and what you add into for the villain, for example. And this is the first page where you can see the difference here between, content-wise, between the earlier edition and this edition. And that is the vertical dark line down, in this case, the left of the page. It's always going to be on the outside of the page, which is a listing of, it's about 30 unnumbered words and phrases. And as we zoom in here, we can just get a sense of what they are. They are just sort of all over the place. I want to call them prompts or creative prompts to think about something like giant fan blades or a wizard's hobby. Defend the gates, goes across the barrier, a good deed, errant nonsense, ancestry is key, the floor is lava, the answer is in the picture. So you can see that these are unrelated by intention, and the idea is that you would look at these, and in reading them, it would spark an idea, a circle of gemstones, the wrath of the vessel, or jousting. And you could use these in really any manner that you wanted to as you were using the rest of the book. So for example, if you were in the section on locations and you were rolling up using this D100 table to roll up some type of structure and description, and then you looked over to the left here and you saw this phrase chain of evidence, for example, or the cloak, you could bring that in and use it to elaborate on the location. Or obviously you could just flip through this book and see any of the tables here in the dark column and use them in conjunction with anything. And when I have my physical copy of the book, I'm going to demonstrate this a little bit more. For me, it's hard to use a PDF, particularly with something that is so long. The PDF came with the physical copy of the book, so I have it, but it's probably not going to get much use from me this way. In viewing it here on my iPad, I don't see that anything is hyperlinked. I don't know whether if I downloaded it onto a laptop, it would be. I'm guessing not, but I'll have to check that out and see. But it is of 500 plus pages as a PDF that's pretty, for me, that's hard to use. But I did want to show you the layout here and the additional material because it is a significant difference from, well, really the only difference from the earlier edition content-wise. And I guess it would be significant if it had meaning to you and you used it, or not if that was something that you wouldn't use. Part of me wanted it to be numbered here on the side because I find paradoxically, when I roll up a random number that gives me one value, that is almost prompting me to be more creative than when I have a list of things with no number and many values. But I see the point here in it being intentionally unnumbered so that you are just looking at this random thing and seeing kind of what jumps out at you. And the amount of work that went into coming up with these types of prompts is pretty admirable here because they really are all over the place. Rust stains, a library, rats. You can see where they are just strands of things that you can put together to either in conjunction with the tables, as I said, or on their own. And when I have the physical copy of the book, I will be going through this in more detail, but I just wanted to give you a quick look into the layout of the revised edition and the new content of the revised edition to see whether it's something that you're interested in picking up. For me, this volume has been over the years one of my most turned to in terms of content and just the variety of content that it offers. As you can see, as I just kind of randomly scroll through various pages here, it is all over the place in a good way. Chapter 2 brings in monsters, and you have monsters by the type, the overall type, and then within each of those sections, you have the D100 tables to roll on and get your monster with some basic description. So it really is possible to play an entire game based on the material in here if you bring in some of your own basic stats. And this monster section goes on to even delineate the various types of attacks your monster might have, and there are tables to tell you how many special attacks it could have, and then the details of what those attacks could be. So you can build your entire monster using this material in this book and get it as detailed as you want. And then chapter 3 is the extensive dungeon design chapter. And again, we're going to go through this more in my video when I have the physical volume, but this is just to give you a sense of what the content of this is, and it follows a very detailed list of giving you an approach to build your dungeon and giving you some ways of giving motivation and elements to a dungeon to get people through it, where there's a time element or a tactical element or monstrous element. So it's not just giving you some tables, although it is giving you those in terms of building it out physically, but also just kind of strategically in terms of how it could work in an adventure. And then it continues on with the getting deeper into designing the adventure. And again, you can see here along the side with the listing of prompts and kind of creative sparks for you to use as you wish. And of course, we have things like traps and various types of traps. If you want a mechanical trap, it will give you how it's concealed, what the trigger is, and lots of levels of detail for that. As with the rest of the book, you have poisons and you have non-lethal poison effects as well as lethal poison effects, complex traps. And you could see here, I didn't mention it, there's not a ton of art in the book. There is a little bit of art, but this is really a book of content that is non-visual. And the intention is to provide you with the details that you can flesh out imaginatively and perhaps visually if you're designing something that way. But there isn't a ton of art in the book. I don't think that's an issue at all, but it is to be noted in case that is something that matters to you. But most of the pages will look like we see here, with text heavy. Now, it has been lightened up in terms of the design and the density of it with this version of the book, but it's not broken up by a lot of art. And we continue on with some dungeon dressing tables, etc. Miscellaneous useful tables for dungeons and bookbindings and herbs. If you want to make some potions, there are details of where you could get what you could be putting into your potions. And then chapter 4 is on non-dungeon design. So this is where we get the information about wilderness and castles and ruins and underwater and in space and cities and settlements. I've mentioned this chapter in a bunch of different videos because having this kind of material is a little bit less popular than having dungeon material, but it is giving you, let's say, outside of a dungeon, details to create places and exploration options. And finally, at the end of the book, we have first the list of tables that we can see here, and this just follows the organization of the book, but as I scroll through it, you can see the huge number of tables that there are, and I do appreciate the fact that the vertical strip on the side continues. So even with the apparatus pages at the back, you're getting that creative prompts. And then we get to what might be the most important part of the book, which is the index at the end, and it is a detailed index that's going to be very useful as you figure out how to use the material that precedes. So for example, if you want to see what tables there are for backstory, you can look under the backstory entry and see even delineated that there are item-based backstories, person-based backstories, and some underlying truth, the backstory. So the level of detail on the index here, I think, looks to be quite useful because you want it to be enough detailed to show you the options available, but not so detailed that it's overwhelming and not useful, because it has to be categorized in a way that allows you to look things up in a broader topic. So I'm happy to see the extensive nature of the index. I haven't compared the index to that of the first edition, but we will take a look at that as mentioned in the other video. So as we close out here with the index, we'll see the back of the book, and it says, indeed, that it is a comprehensive start-to-finish resource for designing fantasy adventures for your favorite tabletop role-playing game. System neutral, can be used with virtually any fantasy game, and it includes random generation tables for almost every step of the design process. locations, villainous plots, new monsters, bizarre environments, etc. Thousands of micro prompts in the margins add additional brainstorming power to the process. And the book is filled with design advice from award-winning author Matt Finch. And indeed, it does do all of those things and more. And that is just a brief look inside my digital version of this book. And when I get the physical copy, as mentioned, I will be bringing it out to the table, rolling some dice, and showing you how I make use of the new material, these prompts along the side, in conjunction with the older material that has been present since the first edition of this book.